Please come back to your seats, please. Right, I'm going to declare the meeting open again, and Councillor Williamson has the right to make a question. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm just trying to ascertain whether I've missed this or not. On page 138 of the consultation document, it actually summarises for the central, for the pay less, get less and pay more, get more, what the total CapEx and the OPEX is. But if you go back in earlier in the document to sort of like page 22, it gives you a really good detail of the central proposal, finishing on page 31, which I think has got a fantastic set of donuts about what percentage of each is going to be in that for OPEX and for CapEx, for the transport sector, for the water sector, for parks and community and so on. It's actually, I think that thing on page 31 is one of the best layouts of what we're talking about. But I don't see it produced for the other two scenarios. And when you have got what they come to in terms of total, I know the total CapEx is 33.5 and the total OPEX is 69.2 for the pay less. But if you read the central proposal, it actually breaks down what's going to go to transport, what's going to go to this, what's going to go to that, so on. Therefore, you can make a really good decision if you like it or not. But if this is a consultation document, why hasn't it got that same donut analysis right down to that level of detail for the other two proposals?
Good question.
Through the chair, in terms of the options of do less and do more, we haven't been that prescriptive. As discussions that we had, multiple discussions that we had at workshops last year, to enable a broad consultation to give you scope to determine that as part of final decision making. So in my response to Councillor Hills earlier before, we talked about, I guess, a similar topic in terms of the feedback form. And so what we're asking of people is not something that is as binary. So it's not three specific proposals. It's your central proposal that was agreed to as part of the mayoral proposal, and then these options to flex either way. So depending on the types of feedback that you get and any further information that we can provide you between here and final decision making, that will help you determine whether or not you shift away from the central proposal in terms of funding less, charging less, or funding more and charging more. So that's why it's not prescriptive, because we don't want binary responses. We want to enable people to give their views around areas of spend.
Right, but if you're going to have a total number, you must know what the components were that added up to it. So where you say 33.5 billion for CapEx and the pay less, and you pay 69.2 for OPEX, there must have been a spreadsheet with lines above it which added up to those numbers. How did you come up with 33.5 and 69.2? And in the pay more, how did you come up with 52 and 76.5? How did you build those numbers?
So it's a combination of some areas we've got detailed numbers, like so for Auckland Transport, we've got a smaller program right up to their 24 billion program that they came and provided workshop material around. Other things like making space for water, we've got that implemented over different time frames. So we've got some of it as there's some specific hard numbers. Others we've had to sort of use broad numbers, estimates, and that some of it's an allocation across activities. So we don't have that firm, we don't have the granular detail that we do have for the central scenario. We've just sort of got broad estimates, and that's why here we've just got those overall global numbers, and then in each activities where there is specific information, we've disclosed that. So it's because we're just kind of seeking the directional impact of would you like to do more or do less, explain what those rates increases might be. But because we haven't built the granular detail of those different scenarios at the extreme, and there could be any sort of combinations within that, sort of the pick and mix approach, we just don't have that granular detail. So
let me just ask it really clearly. How did you come up with 35.5 for CapEx and 69.2 for OPEX? What did you make as your underlying decisions to come up with those numbers?
So we have done broad estimates. As I said, for Auckland Transport, we used the 11 billion at the low end and the 24 billion. And then where we've got other information, we have made assumptions, predictions, allocations to fill in the gaps, to come up with what we think is, what that might look like. So it's broad, high-level estimates, not detailed line-by-line data.
But the problem with that is if you said, well, Auckland Transport, we've actually given you that number, but we don't know what's going to happen with water or parks and community and so on, but they do add to 33.5, then somebody who's been consulted on could say, well, I actually want Auckland Transport to have some more money, but I have no idea how much that would come off others if it's going to add to 33.5. It's got to come from somewhere. It just seems to me that if you're going to have a really good consultative document, if you're looking at this from a business proposal, your central one is your sort of base position, but you've got an upper and a lower one for which the detail isn't in here. It's too fluid, and I don't know what percentage of transport. Those percentages and those donuts are fantastically helpful, that you've got 40% of operating expenditure and 38% of capex for transport. But what would those percentages be in the lower and the upper ones?
Yeah, so one thing that we are working through now that we've landed this document, and things have been changing, like the fuel tax has only just moved, the water care numbers have come through late. We're looking to sort of build out some of that detail. Well, one thing that's useful is we are looking at a budget calculator. We're still working on developing that tool, which I think will get into that kind of, it'll be estimates, it'll be rough, but it should provide a good indication around what these things are and have sort of levers where people can flex. So we're working hard on that to see if we can get together a budget calculator. We'll let people get in and see that and play with it and understand the nature and the impact of some of those movements.
And just through the chair, if we were to prescribe that level of detail in the consultation material, that would reduce your scope of decision making in the final decision making phase, and the direction that we got from you last year as part of all those workshops was that you wanted a very broad scope of consultation to enable as many options to you as is feasible at the final decision making point.
But that just begs the question again. I'm sounding like a crack record, but if you don't have the detail like we've got for the central one, very, very detailed, the donuts are all there. We don't have that level of detail for the less and the more, but somehow we've got what they add to. And I don't know how you come to a total without knowing what the components are. I don't know how you got to 33.5 and 69.2 if you didn't know what the elements for water and the elements for park and the elements for transport were.
Well, we won't know that until we make a decision. What I think...
But then how'd you get 33.5?
Well, yes, it's a less number. And you might
It's just a round arm swing.
Well, I'm guessing, put it this way, if we hear from people that they want a lot more on transport and a lot less on libraries, but they want the middle or the lower one in bulk, then we will jiggle around to get to the middle or the lower one by lifting transport and knocking libraries. It allows us, this is a guide for us to set it, but if we set it everywhere, we'll have no room to move.
No. I was actually expecting people to consult and say, I want more of this and less of this. But I just don't understand on two of the scenarios, the detail's not there, but on the central one, it's all there.
I get that, but
Okay, I'll shut up.
We might juggle around to get there. At least we haven't been stuck in a corner on that one. And I think probably you and I are alone in favouring the lower one, but there we are. We'll have room to move. Are you okay with that, Councillor Williamson? But that was a good question. Thank you. I've got Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll move away from the 100 billion plus, which is kind of equivalent to what they deal with in the US Congress, but to look at the Waiheke Local Board budget for the coming year. You will recall that the governing body meeting, I think it was in November, I did convey the concerns of the Waiheke Local Board about their understanding, their impression that their budget for the coming year was to, capex, was to be drastically cut and disproportionately with the other local boards. According to the Waiheke Local Board, I raised it and got a response from the officers that no, this was news to them. There was nothing disproportionate. However, the answer was not particularly clear at that time, as I may have remarked. However, now that we see the consultation document and we compare it to the document from last year, the Waiheke Local Board was right all along, and their capex, comparing the new consultation document to this consultation document, is a 2/3 cut in their capex. Now, there may be a reason for that. I do note that it is totally disproportionate when you compare to other local boards. But the thing which I consider is unsupportable is, to this moment, the Waiheke Local Board, despite repeated requests by elected members and staff, have not received an explanation from the finance managers. So what I am requesting now, to avoid the appearance of predetermination, which I believe runs right through this document, the Waiheke Local Board should be given the dignity of an explanation of why their capex budget has been cut by 2/3. Can I have an explanation on that now, please? I raised it in November. By now, we should be able to get a clear answer, because this is what has been done to the Waiheke Local Board, and somebody made those decisions deliberately.
To clarify, we don't have the people available right now. We might have to just come back to this question when we have the right people available. If I can just respond broadly, just to clarify the key numbers. So the advice we gave last year was looking at the change to the local board budgets versus the previous budgets. So for the 25 financial year, there were adjustments to all of the local board budgets, and Waiheke was not disproportionate. There were many local boards that had for that year a reduction. I guess what the local board, the numbers you're referring to and what the Waiheke Local Board referring to is the movement from one year to another. You know, the nature of renewals is that sometimes they're large projects, and there are years with large lumpy spends and other years with lower spends. So the advice we gave previously was about the reduction for budget for next financial year, not the movement between years. But we've got people that might be able to come back later on, so if we can come back to this question when we have the right people, just to explain the process, the methodology, you know, what has gone into those, how are those decisions made about prioritising budgets across boards. We can address that later.
Okay, just to reiterate, the capex last year, 2023-24, was 2.7 million. This projected year, it's 855,000. So, as I said, there may be a reasonable explanation. It is disproportionate, that's inarguable. So can the Waiheke Local Board please get a written explanation so they can consult with their members, with the members of the public that they represent? How can they be expected to consult in these have your say meetings if they can't even be given the information that they can explain what's going on in what is meant to be a special consultative procedure? Can we have that written explanation, please?
Okay, I'll just, we're talking to the Waiheke Local Board apparently inside it, but capex is not, OPEX is an even thing that goes through, but capex is not even. If you build a library one year and don't the next year.
Okay, well, you might know, they don't know, so could you share your wisdom about Waiheke buildings, please, Mr Mayor?
We will definitely, I'm just pointing out that's episodic. It's not an even thing. So if, for instance, you build a swimming pool in Fowle where they want to
Just
build
another
one,
question. I think on page
we'll come
60
back to you on that one there for those people, but it isn't an even thing. It just depends on whether you're doing something that year. So there'll be an explanation, it'll be given to you, but
they first asked in November and they're still waiting.
Right,
Okay,
well, no need to
next
get a
question, if
representation
I may.
Yes,
Page
please.
62, managing conflicts of interest. And I quote, managing in accordance with the Council's current processes. In particular, we will ensure that any party providing independent advice on the proposals will be explicitly excluded from participating in executing any transactions. I recall the case of the Australian consultants Flagstaff, who were contracted to give advice on not only options for the port, but also in selling the shares of Auckland International Airport. And I understand they were given a very hefty commission when the shares were sold. Are we saying then tacitly that that was a conflict of interest?
Through you, Chair, I thought we dealt with this one, but no, Flagstaff were paid a fixed fee, which was not dependent on the sale of the shares. They got paid this regardless of whether a sale went ahead or not. Therefore, they weren't conflicted or incentivised by any sale.
I think if we look into the future, which is what the LTP is doing here, we're wanting to embed that principle of people not being incented on a sale going forward as well.
I think you're quite right, Councillor Lee, that was a slightly questionable thing. I'll make sure that never ever happens again, and you can be well aware that I gave severe kicking to those involved.
It looks to me that this is an admission that having Flagstaff give advice on selling the airport shares and being rewarded when those shares were sold was a clear conflict of interest, and now the council is here tacitly, retrospectively admitting that. Am I right?
No,
No.
but it was, in my view, just unfortunate, inexperienced contracting on behalf of the staff, but it had nothing bad about it. It was just cloth-headed.
I'll be raising more about
Can we please have an answer from
our relationship with the
Yes, we are
Flagstaff people
discussing
later on,
today
Mr Mayor.
we are discussing the consultation document, not everyone's view on everything else. So
Okay,
if we can come back to that.
I've just quoted from the consultation
No,
document.
and you did.
Now, one last question, and it relates to the status of this particular meeting and this particular committee. In normal local government process, when it comes to signing off the annual plan or long-term plan, it's done by the governing body of the council. After this meeting, whatever the outcome, will that a decision be confirmed or otherwise by convening the governing body?
Through the Chair, the Budget Committee has delegation under your terms of reference to adopt the consultation document. The only decision that governing body needs to take in this process is final decision making when we adopt the final long-term plan. So that is the only thing that cannot be delegated, and it is not delegated. So when we get to that part of the process, we will do that usual step where we reconvene and the governing body will make decisions on the final.
Just to confirm, thank you, just to confirm, this committee I think is only about 6 months old, right? The Budget Committee, so it has been delegated to undertake what is normally undertaken by the governing body of Auckland Council this time, for whatever reason one can speculate. Is that correct?
Through the Chair, yes.
So it's all kosher, it's all legally done.
Yes,
Thank you very
through the
much.
Chair.
Very much for that. And Councillor Darby, this is questions.
Yeah, I don't intend to make any speeches. But other than thank the staff for the changes at 141, 143, thanks for making yourselves available to me and your Chief of Staff. They are substantial changes and they reflect the resolutions, and I'm grateful. I'm satisfied with how it's looking now. It's accurate, and there's probably a few things on the edges, but I'll let it go. Can I just go to, there is a couple of typos in there, but I'm sure you'll pick them up. Can I just go to 64? Fundamental question, Ross, you said that the financials and the financial projections from the port company have been reflected here. Did I hear you correctly say that?
Yes, those are they provided information as part of the budget inputs, as did every other part of the group, that were fed into the meal proposal, and we've used those projections. We haven't used anything else.
Okay. Can I just loop back on that one there, Mayor, because we do have the CFO, I can see the CFO of the port company and the Chief Executive. Can I just ask possibly the CFO or the Chief Executive, are the financial projections as seen in the consultation document, are they what your organisation see as accurate and fair?
Thanks, Councillor Darby. What I'd say is that we have not formally seen the detail of the numbers, even though we have asked a couple of times to do that, to assist staff. But what I would say is that they appear to be directionally correct, and they appear to be built off the long-term budget submissions we did a significant period of time ago and the work that Flagstaff did.
Okay, can we leave it to our finance and the Chief Executive to tidy that particular issue up? Can we have that assurance?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that the Finance Committee are taking information from the CCOs. They're not fiddling with it.
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing there is that just needs to be a loop closed, I think. And I'll leave it there. Just in terms, while I've got you, Roger, our resolutions talked about the reinvestment into the future fund of dividends and capital returns. So the projections are about dividends, and of course, capital returns is a more difficult thing to pick. Is there any, should we be signalling that there could be capital returns? What would trigger capital returns from your company? Something that could be on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to get to a position where we ended a significant capital investment program and we were continuing to generate superior dividends or superior sort of cash flows, then there may be a situation then that there could be additional returns to the council. And I'd also say the dividend flows as they're projected also grow relatively conservatively, which is, I think there's potential for upside there as well in the status quo model.
If I could add to that as well, I'm not quite sure about the term capital returns, but to the extent that the port continues its increasing trend towards improving its profitability, that adds to the sale value of the operating lease as well.
Yeah, I'm talking about the ongoing public ownership business that we're dealing with at the moment. Okay, there is, I think there's a typo on page 65. I'm assuming these things are still get picked up. There's a percentage missing in about the third down on 65. Can you spot that, Ross? X percent in 25-26. I'll leave that one with you. And then over the page at 66, can I just reconcile some of the scoring here? Can you explain the relationship between the second to bottom line at 66? Oh, and I just want to go back actually. Sorry, I'll go back to 64. There are figures there, figure 4, figure 5, figure 6. They're not explained. Those figures are not explained in the paragraphs above. If you're reading that, it's very difficult to follow. Can we just get some description as to what those figures are? Because there's nothing above. It talks about the table below, but of course there's not a table, there's tables, there's three.
Yes, we'll get those fixed. I think what you're referring to is some XX%, which talks to debt to revenue impact, so we'll get that figure put in. And in terms of the those lines, those figures, what we had in the earlier version, which was before it was designed, we had those interspersed amongst the text, so it was kind of really clear. But in this design version, they've been put into one place. So yes, we'll need to go in and add the reference to the figures in this design version for it to make sense.
Thanks for picking those up. And the last area, Mayor, is can you just explain or reconcile for me on, it's on page 66, and it's the projected financial contribution, that line of 18, 12, 17 and 1. Can you just look at the 17? How does that relate to, if you go up to, so that's under option 3, and if you look at self-insurance resilience, so you come across and it reads, it's got 1 tick for limited ability to self-insure, etc. Limited ability, it's got 1 tick in that category. Can you just reconcile it with the projected financial contribution at 17, which is only 100 million less than the financial contribution for the inclusion of a lease? Does that make sense?
Yeah, through you, Chair, just on the self-insurance, the limited ability means that because the fund's a lot smaller and you had a large claim affecting the fund, your ability to pay future dividends would be severely impacted.
So I'm getting to, as a single tick, a fair representation of an outcome where in option 3 compared with option 1, without the port lease, but with the airport shareholding.
So each option 1 has a much larger fund because you've got both the proceeds from a port and the airport. Option 3 is just for the airport, so you've got a much larger fund in one option compared to another, and therefore the ability to do self-insurance, if there is a large self-insurance claim and still pay dividends, is impacted.
If I can try and tie together one little other piece of information, it's not the projected financial contribution that underpins the support of the insurance program, it's the size of the fund itself.
Okay. I think I'm happy with the rest. Thanks.
Thank goodness for that. Right, I've got no more questions. If you want to retire, we'll go through the comments, which... Thank you very much for your work, particularly Tamsin and Ross. Righto, Councillor Turner and Councillor Sayers so far. Thank you.
Didn't realise I was going to be first, Mr. Mayor. I have to admit that I have trouble at times discerning the difference between chewed dates and some other substances. But I know what I should avoid. If this document was 90% shorter, it would be 100% more useful to the community. And I understand that it is the ratepayer who is the asset of this organisation. And so we have to be honest with the ratepayer. And if that means higher rates, as disappointing as that is, at least then they aren't covered in smoke and peering at mirrors. The way I take this, and I have had lots of talks with lots of people in this place who have gone to a lot of trouble to try to train me, and I appreciate that, but this is us pilfering away our asset and putting it in a bucket so that we can use it to pay our running costs until it's all gone and we're back at exactly the same place. I will change my mind when someone can convince me I should, but I will be voting against this. Thank you.
Refreshing, not. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Worship. I think it's important that we do go out to Aucklanders and get their opinion on the feedback on the options being given. I will be supporting the resolution. My comments just really around GST. It's a point that we've talked about around our different workshops and committee meetings, but it's not particularly delved into in the documentation. So I just would like to take the opportunity to touch on that. Because in the document it refers to, on page 7, about our desire to have a new working relationship with the central government. And amongst a number of topics, one of those is going to be around GST. In other words, saying how do we get the GST returned to councils that is paid on the rates. Which is effectively a tax on a tax. So I would like to encourage Aucklanders to ask for their GST back on the rates that they pay. The refunded GST would go a long way towards helping Auckland Council's funding gaps. And just by way of example, we heard today that there was 600 million lost through the cancellation of the fuel tax. Our rates take is 1.4 billion a year. The GST on that's 217 million. So, and that's year on year. we would get paid that back every year and probably increasing year on year, but it certainly would be a repeated income and a funding source. Effectively, the way I look at it, the government's double dipping by charging GST on rates. The rates are a tax and the GST is a tax on that tax. On page, in your message, Mr. Mayor, up at the front end of the document, you've written, growth delivers substantial increases in income tax and GST revenue for central government and only increase costs for local government. And I agree with that message. So I just want to emphasise the opportunity for Aucklanders, if they also agree with that message, to take the opportunity to feedback about wanting the GST paid back. So just encouraging Aucklanders along those lines, and let's ask them for that feedback along with the other opportunities that they have in this documentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm not quite sure whether we should put that in the questions, but next governing body, one of the things I'm going to put to the council is, will they support a formal letter from me representing the council, not just as mayor, to asking the government to return the GST on rates and to actually pay rates themselves as well. So those are two suggestions from the government's own local government commission, and I want to get the government in a situation where they have to actually say no rather than just sort of sweep it aside. So you will have the opportunity, all of you, to vote for or against that later in the month. I don't know whether, I suppose we can encourage the government, the people to raise that. It is an opportunity for them to raise all the things that they want to raise. I'm sure in your area there'll be lots of people sending us notes about potholes and loose metal roads. And,
There will be, yes.
And I'm sure there'll be people in Waiheke wondering why they've only got 800 million this year, or whatever it was, 800,000. But thank you for that. Councillor Fletcher, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to speak in support of the document today, but in doing so recognise it's complex and we are never going to be able to give all of the information that everybody wants. This is in many ways, and I'm speaking specifically to the port on this, this is really giving Aucklanders the chance for the first time, to understand Auckland's council's position as unsustainable, and we have to have a departure from the way that we've done things traditionally. So I applaud the courage in the process from when we started this some many months ago, the departure from the regular way that we went about it, culminating in this document, which is one that reflects, I think, majority of us, of a pathway that could take us forward, that might be sustainable for Aucklanders. I particularly welcome the opportunity of having Aucklanders think about an Auckland Future Fund. We've got to find ways to mitigate the risks of all of the events that we're seeing in terms of climate change. This is a first step towards that. With regards to the port, I recognise that there will be a whole lot more questions. This is the first step in a very long journey. But what it does do for the first time is it puts out there for Aucklanders to understand that in terms of the tenure of the port, we need the port to remain where it is if we are to consider a lease going forward into the future. And it takes that uncertainty away, which I think will do a lot to whether the port is leased or whether the port isn't leased. I think having that certainty of tenure is going to be absolutely imperative. So I do want to applaud the staff who have tried to work with us. I know that the document is not as perfect as I would like to see it. I, along with Councillor Dalton and others, sat through a very long afternoon with the Audit Committee yesterday, and I know that we all grappled with this. We understood that there were a whole lot of things we would have liked more context and detail on, but in terms of a first start, a first cut of going out to the public, treating them with the intelligence that I know that they have and the maturity to say, the situation isn't sustainable, here are some options, what do you think about that? I think in that respect, this is to be applauded, and frankly, anything is refreshing to me after what I found absolute dishonesty under former councils, where we were assured at this stage in the LTP process, oh, there's no crisis, no, everything is fine, everything's sustainable. And anybody that had a modicule of interest in terms of the future could see that that was just not true. So this is trying to come to grips with a difficult situation. It's really just the first step on quite a long journey, and I give it my support for going up for consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I realise the document is too long for some people and too short for others. There's too much information in it for some people and not enough for others. It is prescribed by central government, and yet we're allowed to do it ourselves. It is impossible to get it right. But it will be all clarified by Councillor Ferry now. Thank you.
Kia ora. I'll try to keep this brief. I will be supporting this going out to consultation, but I do have some serious reservations, particularly around the discussion we're having about the ports lease. Some of the issues I've raised about the future fund. I'm not against the idea of a future fund, but I am concerned that we're not putting out the real transparency around what the net position might be. I'm hopeful that we can get more information into the public arena on those aspects as we go through this consultation process, which will give more clarity and enable people to have a really good say on what this could actually look like. I just wanted to clarify on the local board funding equity part of the proposal, which is I chair the joint governance working party, which has been working on this. And I just wanted to clarify that the joint governance working party did pass that we agreed that local board funding is too low at current levels. So I think it is really important that that reference on page 110 is made clearer. I think we did have a discussion, and thank you to Councillor Hills for raising this, We did have a discussion at an earlier point in this process that the wording wasn't quite right. The intent is not to imply that boards are overfunded, any of them individually or any of them as a bucket. And I think that conversation we've had about the more and the less scenarios is actually going to be really important for local boards to make decisions about their own advocacy positions too. So we need a bit more work on that. But in general, I will be supporting at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. We don't have to support everything in this until support it going out to be heard from the public. I mean, it's not everything in here I'm mad about either, but Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Councillor Baker, were you going to speak?
Oh, you go.
Have you got Councillor Baker? I was waiting to hear him. I'll be supporting this to go out for consultation too. And look, I'm really excited that we can talk to Aucklanders about the Future Fund. It's challenging not having all the information ourselves that is yet to come. But in principle, we do need to look at a way forward for the future of our city. Look, I think if there was anything that I probably wish that I hadn't agreed to, that was putting Bledisloe Terminal on the table. And, you know, now that I read that if the lease went ahead, it's $300 million less potentially. But more than that, it's giving Port of Auckland certainty for the future. And I see a future where we have cruise. I see cruise not interrupting the ferries, and I see Port of Auckland being able to provide that solution really, really quickly if they had certainty over their footprint. So in terms of returning the other two wharves, I think vision and ambition is a great thing, but timing is everything. And I have buildings in my ward that need their roofs fixed. They need millions of dollars for their roofs fixed. Those are the priorities. My Aucklanders do not want to swim at the bottom of Queen Street, but I accept the vision and I would support that vision, but timing is everything because we have been really tight on being able to invest in our communities. So the information, Councillor Darby, you've done a really good job of page 1411 in there has made quite a bit of difference, but it's such a complex topic to be able to speak to Aucklanders about returning the wharves, but specifically Bledisloe. So once we get our debate on after consultation, we'll be able to get into the nuts and bolts of that. But other than that, thank you, Finance, for all of the work that you've done on this, and it's been huge. And thank you, Your Worship and councillors.
Thank you very much for that. Quite a few of your Aucklanders were at the Red Bull cliff diving.
Are you sure? Are you sure?
Yeah, absolutely sure I am. There's 100,000 Aucklanders show up to that, which is an investment from Tātaki of 120,000 was a very good one. But nevertheless, beg your pardon? Councillor Watson, please.
Just a couple of quick comments, Mr Mayor. There's 693 pages in the supporting information. There's 151 pages in the consultation document itself, and there's 9 pages in the feedback form. That makes the feedback form, the wording, the sequencing of options, and the print that associates it all the more important. While there are people in the community who will dutifully, go through the doctoral thesis and trying to disseminate everything that's in there, for the people, the vast majority of which that do bother to respond to this, they're guided largely by the feedback form in my experience. They look at that. That can be a bit of a challenge itself. I've pointed out I don't plan to labour the point anymore. In at least one of the subjects for consultation, there are shortcomings in my view in that. It reminds me a little of the last election in America when Donald Trump was, asked about his plans for Medicare, and he said, "Oh no, we're going to have a system that's great," and that was his answer. Well, there's a kind of element of that in the option for North Harbour Stadium. We're going to better deliver for the needs of the North Shore community. It's that kind of pompous leading that has no substance to it. And for people that are just going through the feedback form, looking to tick off, that's a dangerous situation where they can just go on their feeling of words. And anyone who's studied persuasive language, as indeed all sixth formers used to do in New Zealand, in sociolinguistics, they'll see some of the features employed in parts of our consultation with the use of words with positive connotations and words with negative connotations. It's subtle, but it has an effect, and that's well documented. So I have a concern with that. There are some big items this time round. There's a lot at stake to do with the ports, to do with the remnants of the airport shares. This is as big as it's been in the time I've been on this council, so that makes what appears here all the more important. So having said that, Mr Mayor, it has to go out for consultation. I hope Aucklanders do engage in that consultation. I know from our own experience recently there's a degree of cynicism. In past occasions we've really gone out of our way to encourage people to consult, have held meetings, have put up hoardings, have talked to community groups separately, and the outcome in a number of instances has been very disappointing, to the point where people now longer don't engage. This time round they can't afford to do that. There's too much at stake, whether you're in specific wards or whether you're taking an Auckland-wide view. So I hope they do get out, they do take the time to wade their way through this for the topics that interest them, and they make an informed choice. Thank you.
Excellent contract. Thank you very much. Councillor Walker.
So I'd like to agree with the comments that Councillor Watson has made about the relevance of the feedback form. And as Councillor Watson has pointed out, there are a number of shortcomings there. I'd suggest that there's a significant amount of bias and, as I've pointed out, arguably predetermination. If you go to the supporting information, that view on my part is consolidated, because there's a whole lot of really important information that is not there. One of the things that we're consulting on is an alternative operator. That would be an alternative operator to Tautaki Auckland Unlimited, who've run the stadium down. If you want a basis of comparison, you'd look at the previous North Shore Stadium Trust and look at how it performed. You'd look at the full stadium crowds. If you were illustrating the stadium with a picture, rather than the picture of the backside of the stadium, which is what we have in what we're going out with, you'd actually have the picture that's on the website. If you look up North Harbour Stadium, that shows the stadium in all its glory, probably when the All Blacks were playing there, and it was full. So the very picture that we conveys is actually biased and not portraying that stadium in all its glory. What's not there that should be? There should be some information around the value of that stadium. I think back in the day it was $40 million. I don't know what the replacement cost would be today, but it would be huge. Nor is there any mention, as I pointed out, of the tremendous loss to the North Shore, to North Harbour, that whole significant chunk of Auckland that's growing, who will no longer have any of the content that they previously had in terms of concerts, in terms of the All Blacks, in terms of league, football, FIFA, they're going to be totally lost to the North Shore. That's not being pointed out. The word that's being used is deconstruction. I think most of us know what deconstruction is. Any of you that watch MasterChef and the like understand how they deconstruct things in terms of cakes and the like. That's not what we're talking about here. It's demolition. Demolition. And that is what was described by Auckland Unlimited in the lead up to this. So we need to be honest with Aucklanders. And in my opinion, we're not doing that. If we're going to enable people to submit around financials and alternative operational management, you need to convey some financials, particularly the previous financials. I asked a question around whether depreciation was in the operational cost. I was told no. I know that from my understanding to be not the case. That's some information that we had conveyed to us today, which in my opinion was wrong. So we really have to give good information. And we need to give an alternative picture of a stadium that's well run as it was in the past. So frankly, Mr. Mayor, it's going to be up to the good people of the North Shore to see through this. I'm sure there'll be a lot of them, particularly the people that put their blood, sweat and tears into building the stadium, because it was built on the basis of the backs of donations and a huge amount of effort that people will have put in. So I would suggest, if there's one thing that we see from this plan that we go out for, it will be a rallying cry from the North Shore, from north of the bridge, from all of those communities who do value the stadium, who want to have content in there, and they will see through the cheap buy-off that I see also inherent in this. So I have some confidence that they will see through this, and we'll have a lot of submissions. What follows from that is, I would hope that you, Mr. Mayor, and the fellow councillors will listen to those people, especially from the North Shore. And if they say they want to keep the stadium, they want to see an end to the dysfunctional management, that it can be done better, that we will listen and not take apart a precinct for a stadium which is the only one in New Zealand where there are no issues around noise or sound or parking or transport or many of those things. And this is the most recent stadium in Auckland. Thank you.
Righto, that's good. Councillor Anderson, please.
Oh, good day. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Look, firstly, I want to thank staff, because I know you travel around the city at night and you see the 135 building and you see the lights on. You know the finance staff and the comm staff are working bloody hard to get this all together and working late nights, and I've seen that myself. So you're doing an important service for our city, and I want to thank you for that. Look, I am going to support this to go out. Obviously, I've got concerns. I've raised those concerns in previous forums, but today's not about that. Today's about the views of Aucklanders, and I intend to take them on board 100%. Just want to say, while we're talking about all this, we can't lose the context of this LTP, right? This isn't just an Auckland issue. This is actually a nationwide issue. When you look at the rates increase proposed from other major councils, and I don't really want to lose that bit as we talk about it going forward, 15% and above all across the country. It's fair to say local government has a funding crisis. It's a mismatch between the services people currently enjoy, not the stuff that they need in the future, the stuff they currently rely on in their lives, versus the money needed to pay for it. And we're having successive debates, and this is my second LTP, I think it's my 5th budget, we're having the same discussion over and over again of we just don't have enough money to keep the lights on that people want on. Never mind the stuff that they need in the future. And in Auckland's case, we've got the added blow of, we had $600 million as public revenue announced by the government 12 days ago, cut with no replacement in place at all. you can add that to the growth funding, the borrowing capacity that would have been unlocked through that spending as well. You get a much bigger loss to the public purse than $600 million. I hope the public get a good shot at reprioritising that. Right, and that's why I asked about that, because we need to have a serious conversation with Aucklanders about aligning funding to growth very, very closely. Communities that have taken on the growth, they should be the ones getting the funding to deal with it. I hope that in engaging with this document, Aucklanders can recognise the local government as well as everyone else in the country don't have the revenue tools for long-term comfort and long-term sustainability. Then maybe we need things like GST back on rates. You know, it's currently a tax on a tax. It's totally unfair. I hope that we don't lose sight of these big discussions and we actually keep advocating as strong as we can for a strong financial future for the city. Finally, I'd just say, look, this document does require Aucklanders to make really hard choices. We all get that. We all get we're in a really tough situation as a city. I'd encourage people to both fill out the document, but also talk to your local board members. Talk to your ward councillors that we're here to represent you. This is our job. And these direct conversations are really, really important so that we can act in your interests. So we've got huge problems, and I look forward to Aucklanders' ideas on how to solve them. Thank you, Mayor.
That's what the consultation is about. Well summed up. Thank you very much, Councillor Baker.
Thank you. So first off, I just want to, and as has been done, I just want to acknowledge the staff, not only for the amount of work they've done, but the way in which they have sat here and endured all sorts of shots across the bows. Yes. And some of the language used. And it's a pity sometimes that we don't have the same rules that exist in Parliament about how we can say things, and some of the things that are said around here just bemused me sometimes, without basis, without fact. And I guess the way in which our staff have to endure that just makes me angry sometimes. But you know, so well done to you guys, and I really do want to acknowledge that the hours you have put on. I guess for me, the top of page 8 has a thing that I think should be in bold and in about 16 or 17 font, and that's look to do things differently. Rather than assume that things need to cost so much and remove barriers to pragmatic solutions. You know, that's what people are looking for. That's what people are looking for from this council. That's what the Mayor was elected on. And so, you know, I think this gives us an opportunity. I agree with Councillor Fletcher when she talked about this as a brave way of going out and asking the community to give us feedback. I'm hoping, and I have no hope really, that we are going to do that with an open mind. You know, I've heard things around this table where there is predetermination already on some of the aspects. We're not going to hear this with an open mind. There is predetermination on a number of aspects here. So I want to hear from the public. This is consultation. I don't know what the alternative to not voting this through today is, but it would be chaotic. But I'm really keen to hear what the public have to say, and then I'm really keen to see people around this table with an open mind listening to what those people have to say. And democracy is a funny old thing. You can't be a fan of it only when it works in your favour. So I'm going to be voting for this, Mr Mayor, and am very much looking forward to the feedback, maybe not so much the debate.
Hear, hear. Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Thanks, Your Worship. I too am very happy to support this consultation document. Having done a few of these in the past, I think it's important that we highlight some of the top level things that make this particular LTP consultation different. Because as has been said, one of the reasons I believe that you were elected was to fix Auckland. And you've put up some significant changes to the way we have done things in the past. First one for me is around the Auckland Future Fund concept. The concept itself, what goes in it, and how it works. That's what we're asking Aucklanders for their feedback on. The second one is around the Ports of Auckland, how it's run in the future, and the options to return prime waterland back to Aucklanders or not. Of course, there's rates. And I think what is very interesting about this particular LTP is that you've chosen a central model, And then you've chosen what it would look like potentially if you did more or if you did less, and there's flexibility around that, including targeted rates and including recycling charges for schools. Another big one for me is the North Harbour Stadium. It is the option to keep it as it is, the option to change the management, and the options to redevelop the site. So for me, there is an awful lot to discuss with Aucklanders and a lot to hear their feedback about. Now, the ability for them to process all that information is quite challenging. You know, I mentioned it in my question. I think there's a lot of words in here, and a lot of people will say there's too much words, and there'll be people that says there's not enough. But I'm very, the thing that actually probably bothered me most was the ability for people to learn about what we were sending it out. So I want to acknowledge that the written form is only one part of that. There is written and online feedback. There is face-to-face opportunities for people to have their say. There is social media opportunities for them to say via Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. There will be webinars and there will be translations in many languages to assist. So I think that has made me feel a lot better about the information, knowing there's a lot of variety. I too want to thank the finance team. We've had challenges for a few years now, and I think you have been particularly challenged. I seem to say that a lot, I suppose, over the last few years, with this particular round. And I'd also like to thank Tam and the consultation team. I also want to acknowledge you, Peter. I believe this is your last governing body meeting as CFO for the organisation, and I know that you and your team have fronted the material around that. So to my colleagues and you, Mayor, I think now is the time to absolutely support something, and what's in front of us is as good as what we've got over the past few weeks. It's now up to Aucklanders, and I would encourage every Aucklander to be part of that consultation, to have their say and make sure we're very clear as to what they think about the material we're putting in front of them. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you very much. Councillor Newman, please.
Yeah, look, thank you, Your Worship. We have to go and consult with something. You can't consult with nothing. However perfect or imperfect the consultation document is, you have to have something that's signed off to discuss. There's the aspects of this that I really, really like. There's other things that I have a concern regarding option 2 on North Harbour Stadium, and I think some of the wording issues there absolutely take the point. Don't actually know why we're in that particular discussion, but anyway, look, we're going to have a discussion about North Harbour Stadium, and we'll see what comes out of that. But there are certain things that I think are pretty non-negotiable for me in this 10-year plan, regardless of what the feedback is. And it starts with the need to move to get this depreciation funded. That is absolutely a prudential financial requirement for me that I think has to be a non-negotiable. And there is a need to address the legacy funding equity issues. They haven't been addressed. And look, I get it, CRL funding, Gabriel, floods, Three Waters reform, regional fuel tax. It feels to me like the only thing that's missing is a plague of lotus. There is a lot of things that have happened that this council is in part responsible for, but also things that this council will have to respond to which are beyond its control. And there will be opportunity costs that are paid. Your Worship, if I'm honest with you, I don't know what the budget will look like that commands a majority of support around this table. I'm actually quite nervous about that, very nervous about that, because I feel that there is a need to grapple with some of these issues, and I'd like to think that I'd put my hand up during this term to try and vote for that, but I just don't know what a majority will look like, and I would like to think that this council will pass a budget later this year, because there is a need to do certain things. There is absolutely a need to continue to fund regional capital works, and there is a need, for example, I mean, look, our animal management staff, by way of example, can't be euthanising dogs that shouldn't actually be euthanised, but we have to do it anyway because we've run out of capacity to accommodate in our shelters. So there are things that we have to do. They are statutory, they are non-negotiable. At the same time, it's embarrassing to look at the cost of raised tables and pedestrian crossings. That is so embarrassing to think that after generations have been able to somehow survive crossing the road, that the cost of crossing the road now to do it safely will be exponentially higher than it has been previously. The one thing that I would say, Your Worship, and you know, I've got lots of discussions to have with my constituents, and I'm with officers tonight at a meeting in Hill Park about a matter that you have raised with me, and we'll talk about that with constituents, and people are very concerned about the cost of this council as well as the implications on their rates bill. I always think that council needs to try and show value for money, but also to try and be convenient in the lives of our constituents. Concurrent to this, we're about to start an engagement on a waste management minimisation plan that will cut, if some people have their way, we'll see people's rubbish collection service reduced from weekly to fortnightly in due course. People will equate that to cost of council going up, services to them going down. And I would be very reticent about some of those concurrent discussions and changes that could fall out of that. So, Your Worship, something has to be consulted on. If people don't like it, that's fine, but I would simply like to have further negotiations to try and get a budget together that will pass later this year and which will grapple with some of these issues which have not been properly addressed for perhaps far too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Hard to disagree with any of that. Councillor Foley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. I won't turn on my camera because I've got a big swollen eye and I don't want people to be put off their lunch. But thank you for the discussion so far. I agree with what Councillor Henderson was saying, that there are fundamental issues here around how local government is funded, and we're seeing that across all of councils that are struggling with how they're going to pay for things. But in terms of what's before us today, I am going to support the consultation documents to go out for consultation. Like others, I have concerns as well, but I'm happy for this to go out. At the Audit and Risk Committee yesterday, we heard from staff, we heard from the Audit New Zealand team and our legal team. And so I have at least that peace of mind that what's going out meets all of our legal requirements. And as others have said, including the Deputy Mayor, it's really up to Aucklanders now to come back and tell us what they think. And I'm really happy as well from earlier workshops with Kenneth Ayalupute and his team, who assured us that they are going to have lots of different ways to reach and to engage with Aucklanders across the city. And so I hope to hear from people. But like other councillors have said, Councillor Watson, Councillor Walker, that this will be a rallying cry perhaps for those communities who have real interest in some of the issues that are being put out for us. So I support your proposal to go out, Your Worship, and thank you very much. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Councillor Foley. Hard to disagree with any of that too. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, when I came back to the council, to be honest with you, I never dreamed I'd be sitting in a meeting and being asked to authorise what the recommendation is here today. This is essentially about a massive sale of public assets. Unprecedented, actually, given the scale in the history of local government in New Zealand. One would have thought that Thatcherism, Rogernomics and euthanasia was long in the past, but sadly, it's not. When I stood for council as I normally do, I made it very clear that I oppose the sale of public assets, namely the ports of Auckland, which since I came into politics in 1992 have had a lot to do with retaining its public ownership, indeed extending it to 100%. So I made it very clear that I don't support asset sales, and that's a mandate I have. I don't think anyone in this room, including the Mayor, mentioned at all that they were considering selling public assets. Selling public assets in an election campaign is political death. Even central government politicians don't go there. But here we are. There were promises to fix Auckland Council, and clearly it needs fixing. But my concern is, and I've heard members talk about a funding crisis or funding shortage. We don't have a funding crisis. We have a spending crisis. We have systemic failures in the model we use of outsourcing to ensure value for money, whether it be the CRL, and you can say a rail tunnel, 3.4 kilometre rail tunnel, despite what happens overseas routinely, is a major technical challenge. But even a 1 kilometre cycleway is a major technical challenge and a major cost challenge nowadays. It's a systemic problem, and selling down our assets will not solve the problem. In fact, it will fuel it, just like petrol will fuel a fire. A young person who came to this council was a student, still a teenager, and heard the debate last year on the airport sale, told his father, and his father told me, he said, "Dad, selling the airport, and now the port in effect, is like the parents getting their drug addict son to sell the family home." You can imagine what would happen. And so this young man could see clearly the problem here that we seem to be missing, that making all that cash available, asset stripping the people of Auckland and liquidating those assets and putting cash into a so-called future fund will actually, in effect, create a slush fund. Let's be honest about it. That fund will last about as long as the poor old diversified asset fund, which was expropriated from Auckland Council Investments Limited, cashed up and spent down in no time at all. That's a problem. So I have a problem with the substance of this long-term plan, but I also have a real problem with the process. This is meant to be, by law, a special consultative procedure, but it seems to me we're doing the same old thing as per normal. There's nothing particularly special about this at all. The PR campaign may be a bit more glossier, but essentially the public of Auckland who own the airport, who own the port, will not be able to present, as normally done in local government annual plans, to present directly face-to-face their views to their elected representatives, the councillors and the mayor. Only selected, what are they called, special stakeholders, strategic stakeholders or whatever, a privileged in-group, they'll be able to have a say. The developers were able to have hearings. The people who were interested in Murray wards were accorded the privilege of hearings, but not the people of Auckland when it comes to the fate of their intergenerational publicly owned assets. This is not about fixing Auckland. This is about asset stripping Auckland, and I'll be voting against that. Thank you.
Thank you for that voice out of early Russia. We'll have Richard Hills, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Mayor. The consultation document is based on the decisions we made last year. I obviously didn't agree personally with the port lease going into the consultation, but that's what the vote was in favour of that. I voted for the rest. I obviously have concerns with the local board information. I think it is too complex for people to really understand what I believe are quite dramatic effects in a short amount of time, but I'm happy that we can discuss that over the next few months, and hopefully local boards will understand more and the public will too. I hear time and again around this council that things are broken, or too much borrowing, too much rates, too much sales, too much cuts, not enough this, but then often no solutions. So there are a lot of solutions in here. There's some I don't agree with. I didn't agree with some of the things in the last budget that I ended up supporting, because my priority is to save and support the services that Aucklanders really want us to do and prevent those reductions and cuts like we did try to reduce some of those things last year. The issue does continue to snowball. I think, Phil Goff asked for GST back on rates to the last government. Mayor Brown has asked for that of the last government and the new government. We've had the RFT cut from us, which isn't just that $1.2 billion. It's also the borrowing of, I think it's about $400 million a year of new capital we won't have access to, plus the DCs that come to that. So that's, could be over $2 billion worth of capital that has just gone that we need to figure out how to fund. Same with Three Waters. I know we didn't agree with some of those things, but because we were legally not allowed to put that in our LTP until, last week, now that has come back into our balance sheet and we're trying to figure out how to fund that. We are responsible for what state governments of Australia are responsible for in infrastructure, but we are still only enabled to fund things like district councils are through mostly just rates and fees and charges. So there is it's still broken, and this consultation document does try and address some of those things, but we are still far behind, and we will still continue to end up with a huge renewal list and a huge list of capital that has to be funded. I do wish that there was more clear in the consultation document about our climate impacts and our responsibilities, and the fact that we aren't going to achieve the emissions reduction that we keep telling Aucklanders, and Aucklanders keep telling us we must do. Business, mana whenua, community are all asking us to do that, and that's not clear. But I do thank you, Mayor, and the finance team for the options in there, and I do hope they were able to create a sort of puzzle piece of priorities that the community shows that they want, and bring that together, whether it's additional money for local boards or reduce money in some other areas or more transport funding. We do talk a lot about speed bumps and cycleways here, but to there's a few road rehabs happening in our ward right now. Some of those, just maintenance, is over $5 or $6 million for one stretch of road just to replace road. So when we talk about a couple $1 million for a cycleway, but we talk about roads, 7,000 kilometres of them that need to replace, we're talking about multi-million dollars just in replacing those. So we do need to figure out how we move people around this city safely, and how we get kids walking and cycling to school so we're not congested every week of the year apart from the holidays. And some of that isn't in this document, and I'm sure the conversations will continue. I think largely the document has been pretty well done. People want more, people want less, but I think if people want to dive deep into this, they will. But I just want to make sure we get Aucklanders to have their say. So I'm hoping that we get a big turnout of voices across all the documents and questions in here. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Well, that sums it up pretty well. Everyone's got this. Councillor Newman's right. No one knows what the budget's going to work out as, because we are going to listen to Auckland. We are voting for putting this out to Auckland. So a vote against it is that you don't want Aucklanders to have a say. We've heard about depreciation, local boards, future fund. There's views for and back and all these things. Not in favour. No one's in favour of every single piece in this. Some people it's too long, some people it's too short, some people there's too much information, some people there's not enough. So it's about right. There are words about deep words. I know we've had a lot of stuff, but the very word that will produce the consultation about the North Harbour Stadium is the word North Harbour Stadium. That will produce it. You don't have to worry about the details about it. We're going to hear about what the people think about it. And I'm looking forward to hearing about what Aucklanders think about it. That's the whole point of this. So I'm now going to put the vote. And no one's asked for it. Yeah.
Microphone.
Can't hear you.
In an instance where a councillor wants to record their opposition to part of what we're going out with, for example, in my instance, that would cover off North Harbour Stadium, is it possible to have that recorded?
Absolutely. It does show that you are not open-minded, of course, doing that, but I'm quite happy to have you do that.
Well, that's your view that I'm not open-minded.
Beg your pardon?
No, I won't carry on.
So those that want to announce bits and pieces they don't like, I mean, we'll be here for hours, but you're welcome to if you wish. At this stage, I'm just going to put it, and all those in favour say aye. Aye. And the contrary?
Against, please record my vote.
Recorded vote requirement from councillors Turner and Lee.
Completely against?
Beg your pardon?
Is that completely against?
Completely against, and a partial against from councillor Walker, is that correct? And Watson?
I'm happy to convey some words to the officers, but essentially it will cover off issues to do with North Harbour Stadium.
Okay, well, you're in favour of going out, but you're not happy about the North Harbour Stadium. We'll record that for those two. Is that correct?
Microphone, please.
Sorry.
We're just recording our concerns over the documentation relating to North Harbour Stadium.
Okay, fair enough.
We're not expressing a view.
No one would ever think that. I think from the result of that we can say that we have achieved approval to put this out for consultation, and well, I'm looking forward to all of you encouraging your all those people that you can to get involved, send us back what they want. Beg your pardon? Well, yes. And I'd also like to just say that have a, you know, I haven't quite finished yet. It is the last time that we will have appearing before us Mr. Gudsall, and I'd like to thank him for his work. He has managed to escape this place and is going on to earn more money in a nicer place. And so he will be having a seminar on how we achieve that shortly, and I will be attending for one. Thank you, Mr. Gudsall. There is another item, number 8, which is a summary of all the torturous workshops which some of you attended every one of them actually, thank God, and I did too. I can't believe I did that. As it's been moved by Councillor... yeah, good old Baker got out there. Right, there's a contest to be this one. I believe 2 people have, and the secretaries have found that. All those in favour, please say aye. To the contrary, no. Carried. And with that, with great relief, I'm going to call this meeting to a close. And thank you for your attendance. Thank you for the way you've carried out on that, in most cases. And we look forward to the next round of this, which will take place in a full future. Cheerio.